Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to the Infatuasian podcast. And if this is your first time listening, thank you so much for dropping by. And if you've listened to us a bunch of times, hey, thank you too for your continued support. Today we'll be speaking with Allison Lee. Allison is a licensed clinical social worker and Asian mental health specialist. We'll be talking about how she helps first and second generation adults navigate the balance between maintaining relationships with parents and loved ones while also pursuing your own dreams and desires. Lots of good things to unpack there, so please stick around and join the conversation. And as always, thanks for listening. It's my pleasure to welcome Allison to the show. Hey, Allison.
Hey, Curtis. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah. No, my pleasure. Let's see. You're calling in from Southern Cal today?
Yes. Southern California. Rainy or drizzly.
Yeah. Isn't that weird? It's like we're talking about rain in California. It never rains in California. What's going on?
Yeah.
Hey, what's good down in LA right now?
It's just hanging out. We got some boba, waiting to eat some good food and just hang out.
Yeah, later on I gotta pick your brain. You're in the San Gabriel Valley?
Yeah.
I gotta pick your brain. There's too many restaurants to name, but yeah, send me a couple of your favorites.
Yeah, I can, definitely.
All right. Actually, speaking of food, we like to greet our guests in the Asian way. So Allison Lee, have you eaten yet?
I actually haven't eaten lunch yet.
Oh no!
I took a couple of bites before we got on, but my stir-fry noodle is waiting for me.
Oh no! I hope it's warm. Okay, so we'll hurry up so it's not cold by the time you get it.
Yeah, I had breakfast and it was a big breakfast, so all good.
Okay,
Have you?
Okay. You know what? Actually, ironically, I have not either. We went out this morning and then we went to the Fortune. I don't know if you've been to San Francisco's Chinatown, but we went to the Fortune Cookie Factory.
I haven't been there.
They sell like really fresh fortune. If you've never had a fresh fortune cookie, you got to go to this place. And they sell them in these bags, and they're so light and full of air. And the next thing you know, you've eaten 20 of them. So that was kind of my snack on the way home from where we were earlier. So I'm kind of full, so I didn't feel like eating lunch, but we'll get there. We'll get around to it.
Yeah, that's cool. I want to check that out. I've only had it in plastic wraps that come ahead of time, right? So,
and you have no idea how old those are. They could be like 3 years old.
That's true.
No, go get a fresh one. They're actually baking them as you go in. They're baking them, and they'll give you some hot ones, and they're super good. Yeah, so
thanks for the tip.
Shout out to Golden Gate Fortune Cookie Factory on Ross Alley in Chinatown.
Nice.
All right. Can we dig into your roots a little bit?
Yeah. I grew up in San Gabriel Valley. I am actually Chinese, but I didn't 100% Chinese, but I didn't know that until I went to undergrad. For my whole life, I thought I was half Vietnamese and half Chinese because I actually speak Vietnamese. My parents also speak Chu Chao. And so my whole life I was like, I'm half. And then I go to college, they say, go ask your parents all these questions for this paper. And I did. And I was like, what? I'm 100% Chinese. And I had a little bit of identity crisis. I'm like, what else do I not know about my heritage, right? Like, it was a revelation. And I don't speak Chu Chao very well. I know, like, have you eaten yet in Chu Chao?
Right.
Let me use the bathroom, stuff like that. But I speak Vietnamese conversationally.
All I know is Gagi Nang.
Yes, that's the only word you need to know, and you have an ultimate connection.
Right. You walk into a store, and if you know that they're Teochew, you just say, hey, Gagi Nang.
Yeah. How do you know that phrase? Do you know, or are you?
My wife's uncle is Teochew. And then, in San Francisco, so folks out there, if you don't know, Chu Chao or Teochew is kind of like a region in China. Is that right?
I think so.
And the folks there had to flee to Southeast Asia a lot. I think a lot of them fled from communism or other reasons or famine. There's a kind of a famine. And so they ended up in Vietnam and Thailand and all over Southeast Asia, Cambodia, a lot in Cambodia. And I interviewed Mei Li Tao. Mei Li Tao is the donut princess. she's down by you, I guess. And she does this on her Instagram. She does Teochew words daily. So she does Teochew vocabulary.
I need to follow her.
Go check it out. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I interviewed her, and then I have a few friends that are, shout out to Holly if you're listening, a couple of Teachu friends out there. And so I just know that one word. And then Maylee shared another phrase that I really thought was cool. It was like when you're eating some food and I don't know how to say it, but the meaning is if you're eating some food and it's really good, you say this phrase and it means something like, it's kind of like if you know, you know. It's kind of like a phrase when you eat some really good food and you're just you just say it out loud like, oh man, this is the thing.
Oh, I don't know what that is. Some
Yeah.
words are coming up, but I don't know if they're Cantonese or Chichao. I don't know Cantonese, so that's why it's like all mixed together.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
I'd be
go to
curious.
here, here's a shout out for myself. Go to that episode and you can
Yeah.
hear the phrase that she was thinking of because I asked her what her favorite phrase was. So that's kind of cool though. You know, I did 23andMe, well, I did Ancestry.com,
Mm.
and it turns out that I'm actually 8% Vietnamese. Or
Ooh.
I have genes that are aligned with 8%. 8% of my genes line up with Vietnamese genes. So I had no idea. I thought I was 100% Chinese.
Yeah, I guess
So
maybe no one's, I don't know. Maybe is anyone 100% anything, I guess?
I
Maybe
know,
not.
right? I bet if you have you ever
Mhm.
done it? I bet if you did it, you would have
No.
some Southeast Asian,
Yeah, I
maybe.
haven't tried that.
Yeah. So ethnically, your parents speak Vietnamese
Mhm. And
and
Chichao.
Teochew. Uh
Hmm.
huh. Uh huh. So you kind of just grew up in a household that was. So actually, I wanted to talk to you about this. So when you define generations, how do you define? You call yourself second gen?
Yeah. So second gen is when one or both parents aren't born in the same country that
Uh,
the child is born in. So my parents weren't born here, so I'm second gen.
okay.
I had moved to like let's say Australia or Vietnam, then I would be first gen there.
Okay. So
Yeah.
it's first generation to be in this country.
Hmm.
And then so you're the second generation, but you're like the first generation born here,
Yeah.
but
So I
second
got really
generation.
confused.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. That's confusing. Because I've always so I've called myself fifth generation,
Mhm.
but that is fifth generation who's lived here, but I'm the fourth generation born here.
I see. So you would be fourth gen according to that, right? That was also written by the US Census.
Okay.
So also, however you want to identify, go for it,
Yeah,
right? But
yeah,
yeah,
I
that
know.
was just like an official definition.
Okay, so like my great great grandparents were immigrants. So, but you would call them first gen.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I am fifth gen.
Hmm. Oh.
Okay, because they came here as teenagers
Hmm.
in like 1879 or something like that, or like 18 something. But they weren't born here. Oh man, this is confusing.
Yeah.
I gotta
Gotta
draw
like
a
draw it
map.
out.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Okay, but so you're saying you're second gen because you're second generation to live here.
Second gen, because I have one or yeah, second gen to live here. That's right. It's a good
Okay,
way to
so
phrase it.
all right, so both parents were born overseas but
Hmm.
immigrated here, and so they're
Yeah.
first generation to live here.
Hmm.
Okay, so we're talking about first and second generation today. Uh, do you notice a difference? Like, do you have any clients that are like third or fourth generation?
I do. Mostly third, maybe, or like 2.5 if they had one
Mm,
parent
yeah, that
that
gets even
like,
more
yeah,
complicated.
I know. But surprisingly, most of my clients are usually second gen.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. My wife's second gen, so I think I have some questions, but mostly
Yeah.
from her perspective, maybe because my well, we'll talk about my generation too, because I think when you're several generations in, it's a little different, but maybe not as different as you might think.
Hmm.
All right, so I'm guessing that you had a little experience with parental pressure, or maybe some, disapproval of your career choices, just based on what you do. Were your parents on board with you taking this route, or was it a little bit of a battle?
They actually didn't really know what I wanted to do, right?
Hmm.
They're like, "What's therapy?" And I had to like Google Translate it to try to explain it to them.
Uh-huh.
And since that that wasn't something that they were really growing up around or were exposed to, like mental health therapy, they didn't really know what it was. And I was like, I just talk to people and help them, and
Hmm.
just like kind of
Hmm.
generalize it. So they didn't approve or disapprove. It was kind of very neutral. But they were just happy that, I had a job and
Yeah.
was successful to some extent. And yeah.
Yeah. And this might be real personal, but I think it's relevant to this topic. Did they have a hard journey to get here?
I definitely, right? Anytime there's a history of migration, there could be a lot of like difficult things that you have to transition to. And they didn't know the language here because they came from
Right.
Vietnam separately. I think my dad had more of a difficult journey because he actually came over by boat. My mom got taken over, like my aunt helped her come over. So that was a little bit smoother for her. But the culture shock, the language transitions, losing like what you knew growing up
Yeah.
is traumatic for like anyone.
And
So
they were adults when they came over?
mhm,
Oh, yeah, that's hard.
yeah, so it's a little harder trying to transition when you're older too. I mean, harder and easier in different ways, right? But
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
not always a smooth transition.
Yeah, yeah, no, I'm older than you, so a lot of my friends were born in the 70s, and if they came from Southeast Asia and they're in the 70s, that was a really, really hard time for a lot of folks from Southeast Asia to get here to America, and just some of the things that my friends will say, so we're in our 50s now, but they'll say like, oh, I used to have, two more brothers and
Mm.
they just didn't make it, and they have a lot of issues and trauma involved with just trying to get out of the country, and with everything you own on your back is really, really tough
Yeah,
times. Yeah.
yeah.
All right. So you went to college and ended up studying Asian American Studies and sociology or social work.
Sociology.
Okay, sociology. Did you get into this right away? Were you like thinking of going to social work right away, or did you kind of tinker around with other things?
Right after I graduated undergrad, I was a case manager for a year, and that's when I was
Mm,
applying to grad school. So I knew I wanted to get into therapy and be a
uh-huh.
licensed professional then. So yeah, after that transition to the right major, it was a straight shot.
Mm-hmm. And then, so you kind of niche down. I take it that most of your clients are Asian American.
Yes, there, most of them.
What made you kind of niche down into that area?
I think it actually happened, like they kind of chose me, right? Like
Oh, okay.
once I got into my private practice, but when I first started out in community mental health, I worked at an Asian community mental health office where I worked with actually a lot of people in the San Gabriel Valley where I grew up. And
Mm,
because I speak Vietnamese, I worked with children first. And
mm,
because I spoke Vietnamese, I was able to complete paperwork and do all that stuff with the parents in Vietnamese and see the students and talk to them in English. So that was really great. And I loved that job. And I think that's where I first used, my bilingual skills to support the
mm,
community. And then I transitioned to working to schools. And when I got licensed and opened up my own private practice, like they kind of came to me. Like it just so happens
mm.
that the niche continued, and it was something I really like resonated with, right? And I don't know, somehow they all are.
Yeah.
And then I claimed it.
Yeah. You know what? I mean, it's a good space to be in, I guess, because you're
Yeah.
right there. So Allison Lee Therapy is your
Mhm.
business. Do, I looked around on your website a little bit. It seems like a little bit of a mixture between, and you can customize this, I suppose, a little mixture between coaching and therapy, or is it lean a little more towards coaching, or what? How would you describe your business?
Yeah, so I have two separate businesses. So the therapy practice is separate and the coaching business is separate.
Okay.
So yeah, so the Allison Lee therapy is for my therapy practice, and Hey Allison Lee is my coaching. My
Hmm.
Instagram touches on both. So
Okay.
I mean, it touches on both in the sense that it can go either
Sure.
direction,
Yeah.
but the businesses are separate. So if someone comes to me for coaching, they won't get therapy. And
Mm.
yeah.
Okay, sounds good. And we'll mention those things in the show notes so you can find Allison either way. There's two different websites that you can find, and we'll mention those in the show notes at the bottom. But let's talk a little bit about what you're doing. So it's really interesting. If you look on Allison's Instagram, you'll see lots of little tips and just affirmations, as well as some just information that you can find out about dealing with these issues. What are the kind of the main issues that clients come to you with?
Yeah, so a lot of times second gens come to therapy or even coaching, right? And then the treatment and the work that we do would be different. But oftentimes they come really burnt out, really tired,
Mm,
really feeling like their needs weren't met. And that can be many different kinds of needs, right?
mm-hmm,
And a lot of times there's this desire to like connect with their families or connect with people more, but they just don't have the energy or don't really feel like they can. And they
mm,
kind of want to just like cut people out or like not really try to nourish the relationship anymore because they're so burnt out. And really the root cause of those things is that they're kind of in the repay cycle, which I can go over later, but they're sacrificing too much and not really taking care of themselves, so they burn themselves out essentially.
mm,
And that can
mm.
happen in work, it can happen in relationships and just like their personal lives. So it's really about like how to take care of themselves and set boundaries. That's why I really love talking about boundaries, because without
Mm.
boundaries, we can't really get our needs met and get other people's needs met when we want to really strengthen the relationships.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a phrase or it's a line from a movie, but it's something like, you're no good to me dead. Like basically, if you're so burnt out, you're not even helping the people that you want to help, that you're stressed out about helping.
Yeah.
Do you find that most of your clients refer themselves to you, or like, kind of self refer, or do you find that other people kind of recommend them or push them into counseling or therapy?
Like in their own personal lives, if people are like, you should go.
Yeah, yeah. I'm wondering
Mm.
if people kind of make the decision themselves, like, "Oh man, I'm really burnt out. I need to go see someone or talk to someone," or is it someone else saying, "Hey, I noticed that you're really stressed out or burnt out," like a partner or a spouse might say, "Hey, maybe
Yeah.
you should go check out this Allison Lee person out."
I feel like, and I'm not 100% sure, but I feel like most of them find me themselves because they're really
Mm,
aware that they're like maxing out and not really showing up in the way that they really want to. So I
mm,
think there is a level of that, but it helps when people do point it out, right? If work is
mm,
like, hey, like what's going on, or there's a conflict, or if conflicts kind of continue in the same patterns, I think they kind of pick that up. So it's a combination, but most of the time, I think it's when they're really motivated to do something different about it or feel like
mm,
they have tried everything and don't know what else to do.
mm, mm. I feel like we've talked about it a little bit already, but in what ways does this burnout or stress or guilt manifest itself?
Yeah. So it really comes out in irritability is the common theme,
Mm,
feeling like wanting to withdraw, feeling isolated, and feeling like no one understands them, right? But I
mm,
think irritability is the big one where they're really like louder than they like to be, or not saying the things that they want, or not just don't
mm,
feel good within their bodies, or they feel exhausted all the time,
mm,
because they haven't taken the time to actually nourish their own needs and like rest for 5 minutes before helping someone or do something else, right? Like it's really an overextension of what they're able to do. And it's hard to know sometimes, which is valid for anyone, right? Where we may not know what our boundaries are sometimes until it's crossed, because new situations are going to arise and we won't know how we feel about it until we go
mm-hmm.
through it sometimes. But
Yeah.
so it's like a trial and error, and we have to like kind of take note, but it usually comes off as irritability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like you said, just saying things that you don't know why you said that, or reacting in a way you're like, why did I react that way? It wasn't that big a deal. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
I understand that. So a second ago, you mentioned the repay cycle, and that's something that you've kind of trademarked and talk about. What is the repay cycle?
Yeah, I love the repay cycle. So there's four steps to it. It's a cycle, so we repeat it. The first is awareness, and then we repay, and then there's self-sacrifice, mixed emotions, and then we go back to
Mm,
awareness. So I can
mm,
go through them individually. Awareness
sure.
is when we are internally motivated to repay our family members. Like, for example, like when I grew up, I was like, I want to help support my family. I want to help them with this and that.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be expected of us, right? What if the
Mm-hmm.
parents are like,
The
hey,
Asian guilt trip.
yes, you're gonna make a lot of money and take care of me, or you're gonna
Mm,
help me with this, or like have a good job, It could be
Yeah.
verbally said or like even non-verbally
Right.
expressed to us.
Yeah.
So somehow, some way, we get that awareness of like this desire to give back, right? Especially if we know that there is a difference in our privilege, our access, our language, right? Language is a huge one for second and first gen.
Mm-hmm.
To translate, to do things for, to
Yeah.
drive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The little kids making these adult decisions, doing
Yes.
taxes and
Yeah.
immigration or financial assistance forms and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So then that goes to the repay, which is some of what you just said, right? The paperwork, the taxes,
Uh,
the giving, caretaking, right? It could be physical, it could be emotional
mm-hmm.
even, or just trying to like stand up for your family members, whatever it is that we're doing to take care of our family members.
Mm-hmm.
We do them, and we do them so much so sometimes that we end up in self-sacrifice where we do it without thinking about our own needs. Like, oh, mom needs to do this. I'm going to go help her right away without thinking like, what do I need first
Yeah.
to show
Yeah.
up as my best self there? Then we end up feeling tired, irritable, burnt out. And
Yeah.
then the mixed emotion of like feeling guilty that we feel angry, resentful, or
Mm-hmm.
just annoyed at the people that we're trying to care
Mm-hmm.
for. And then we go back to awareness of like, oh, well, I'm the only one that can help them, or I want to help them, or I have to
Mm-hmm.
help them. And then we
Yeah.
repeat the cycle.
Yeah.
So it's a
Yeah.
it's a reoccurring cycle that we can move through quicker when we do set boundaries. So it's not that it'll ever go away, perhaps, especially for people who want to take care of their family, but we can move
Right.
through it quicker and maybe less with less self-sacrifice.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there's no. I mean, I don't want to say there's no fault in this, but it's when your parents are at a vulnerable or helpless stage, when you're a kid and they don't speak English, you feel like, well, it's not their fault, but then you kind of resent them for not being able to speak English, not be
Yeah.
able to do it. And so, yeah, no, I see this. I see this all the time because I work with a lot of first gen and second gen kids at my high school, and then so I've seen them grow up, and a lot of them are just, I have to get into med school or I have to get into this college because, and I'm like, why? What's wrong with City College? And now my mom would be so disappointed, or like that cycle of just the guilt and like they feel like they owe their parents so much. And it's true because their parents did go through a lot for them
Mm-hmm.
to have a better life, but at the same time, the weight to place on a kid or even a young adult, that kind of weight is so hard.
Yeah, and it's hard to kind of know like what we truly want, right? Even going back to creatives and art, right? That is like a field
Mm-hmm.
that most first and second gen parents don't really know about. So it's like, what are you
Mm-hmm.
doing? Right? Even
Yeah.
therapy, like you asked earlier, my
Yeah.
parents don't even know what therapy is,
Yeah. Yeah.
or they didn't.
Like a funny story is, so I went to a pretty competitive high school, and my friend group, I don't know, let's say a dozen people, like half of them are doctors, most of them are Asian, and half of them are doctors, but there's this one kid, Asian kid, well, he's 50 now, but Asian, at the time he was an Asian kid, was the one guy who was the art major, right, of my friends, coming from this competitive school, and the art major, we're kind of like, ooh, your parents okay with that, right? But then he ended up, now, I mean, he's worked at Adobe for like 45 years, or not 45 years, for 35 years, and is super successful. And of my friends, maybe one of the most financially successful of us, So it's kind of like, sometimes you don't know, like you almost want to tell the parents to kind of chill out a little bit because you don't always know like how things are going to turn out. But I understand, the weight of
Yeah.
expectations. Yeah.
Yeah, and they probably don't know either, right? If they're not exposed to like how someone who works at Adobe could be successful, all they see are doctors and I don't know,
Hmm.
lawyers and whatever else they see, then that's in their eyes what successful is, and they want that for their kids, right? Or
Yeah.
they think that's the most stable because they've come from a place that's not so stable.
Yeah. Do you think that worry about your kid, we're both parents. So do you think that worry about your kids is a form of love or a love language?
I think so.
I think
I
so,
mean,
right?
obviously, I think we don't worry about anything we don't care about, right? Like if I don't
Mm,
care about not getting hit by a car, I'm not going to look across the street, right? Or
this
look
is
both
true.
ways before I cross the
Yeah.
street. So it's like there's always a reason why we're worrying, and it's just making sure that it's manageable and not like overdone.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
it's a hard place
It is a
to get
hard
to.
because I do get it. I do get it when an Asian parent really their concern for their kid or their love for their kid comes out kind of as toxic worry, in a sense where it's like, oh, you have to get this job because if you don't get this job, you're not going to be successful or happy. And that's all I really want is for you to be happy. But the kid is like, but I can do that and be creative and be entrepreneurial or take some chances in doing things other than being an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer. But for the parents, I guess I do understand it, but sometimes it just gets so toxic.
Mhm. It's hard to, yeah, like have that conversation too if, both people aren't kind of ready for that conversation to like see how else I could achieve this.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's tough.
Do you think it's changing a little bit? Like, I don't know if you've I was listening to a podcast the other day with some young creatives. Well, I say they're young; they're in their 30s now, but they were kind of pioneers in the YouTube space. These are people that we all kind of grew up with, Asian YouTubers in the early 2000s, and they were saying that things have changed. That now 20-year-olds aren't as worried about their parents not letting them go into these creative fields because I think the roadmap is a little more visible. Do you feel like things are changing a little bit? Like, I know that medicine and law and engineering are still kind of the gold standards, but are you feel like maybe the next generation are starting to feel like, okay, maybe creative work is not a death sentence for a kid?
Yeah. And I think that helps with like you're saying, right? There's more exposure of people who are Asian in the industry, in the media, podcasts like yours, right? Like there's more exposure, so maybe there's a little bit of normalizing that more now. And I think maybe for like the younger people, they feel more justified or like, look at this person that looks like me is able to do it, so I can too. So that can push them a little more than they would have like 20, 30, 50 years ago, right? To not have that representation.
Right.
And I would imagine it would help the parents to see that as well.
Yeah, no, I think so. Like we talked to Shirley Chung. She's a chef. She has Miss Chi Cafe in Culver City, but she was on Top Chef a couple times, and she's been on Guy Fieri's Tournament of Champions a couple times. And she said that her parents were like, she was in business before, and then her parents were kind of like, when she wanted to go to culinary, her parents were like, what are you going to do with culinary academy and, work in a kitchen? We came to this country so you didn't have to work in the kitchen, because for so many years, Asians, that was kind of like the only job they could get was working in a restaurant. And so she was kind of like, don't worry about it. I like what I'm doing. And then once she got on TV, though, then they kind of softened and they're kind of like, oh, you're on Top Chef. I can brag about you to my friends now and stuff like that. So it's kind of interesting. But yeah, I think in the culinary space, you see a lot of role models. And then even in television and movies, you're starting to see more people of Asian descent being able to make a career of it. And writing, a lot of Asian authors lately have been doing great. So I think the roadmap is there a little more than it used to, and at least they can kind of see some examples.
Yeah. And it kind of ties back to what you said about, is worry a love language, right? If they're worried about like, is this going to be actually better for you, whatever that means, so that you don't have to like suffer the way I did, right? But it comes off like there's a way to say it, and sometimes it doesn't come off in the best way, or maybe there's no conversation about it that makes it more challenging.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get back to a little bit more about what you do with your clients. So if someone were to contact you, what's the first step for someone who's feeling burnt out, a little anger issues or irritability, and they call you? Where do you start?
Yeah. So if they reached out, if they wanted therapy, right, they would reach out to my therapy practice. And with that route, they first of all would have to be in California. So whatever state that the person is residing in, they have to make sure that they're seeing a therapist who's licensed in that state.
Okay.
And that's partially why I started my coaching program, because some of the information that I have, I think could be beneficial to people generally. And I didn't want to be restricted to California. So that's why that's a separate business, but it's not therapy, right? It's just information, tools that people can kind of be guided through to use if they would like, but it's not therapy. But with a therapist and or with myself, there would be a consultation call, right? We would see for a good fit what the goals are and what they want to address and see if my modalities and what they're saying generally seems like it would be beneficial for them. And a good thing that I always tell all my consult calls or and clients is that they always have a choice, right? Just because you call someone, you talk to them and you commit to like working with them for a little while doesn't mean you're stuck with them forever. Just having that option just to see what would best suit the client. And then we start doing some paperwork and setting more detailed goals on what it is they want to address and kind of build a path towards that with therapy. And with coaching, they could purchase my course or do the coaching and the course to kind of have me guide them through how to use the tools. But that one wouldn't, again, be therapy. It'd be more information and general ways to implement the tools.
Okay. So you're located in Southern Cal, but do you do if they're in California, you can do some online.
Yeah, I actually have some clients all over California and the Bay Area. Yeah.
Okay, as long as it's California.
So I do all virtual therapy. So that's important too. If people want online therapy or in-person therapy, that's a big thing to keep in mind too.
Okay, so you don't do in-person.
I don't, not anymore.
Okay. Yeah, you know what? It's kind of nice though with the technology now. You can just do it from your house if you really wanted to. Yeah, that's great. And so what are some of the, I don't want you to give away things for free here, but what are some of the things that you might work with people about?
So I do have some freebies actually about this. That's a starting point. It's like this 3 things that we're telling ourselves that we should stop telling ourselves that actually stops us from connecting with the people that we want to connect with the most. And a lot of the themes that with second gen specifically that comes up is doing it all by yourself. Like I need to be successful. I need to succeed, and just like really not asking for help, right? And really depending on ourselves. And that is a struggle that also leads to burnout, where if we're doing everything ourselves and feel like all the stress and pressure is on us, that's going to be a road to like burnout and tiredness and fatigue.
Okay. So they can find that on your website?
Yeah, they could find that freebie there. And I think it's really just being mindful of what we tell ourselves and really being more in tune with what we need. Because for second gens, especially if we're in the repay cycle, if we want to give back and help, it's really easy to think about other people and not our own needs. And then we get caught up on that track. And then it's kind of hard to go back when we don't know what we want.
So you mentioned setting boundaries as being one of your favorite things to talk to people about. What does that look like on a practical level? What might a second gen person, what kind of boundaries would a second gen person might want to set?
So boundaries that they would want to set might be around their time and their energy and even just like what they want to do practically, right? So again, if there's a lot of expectations in the family to help or to be available to do this and that, and their automatic knee-jerk reaction is to usually say yes, that's on the road to burnout if they're not continuously taking care of themselves, right? And I think it's just having that little bit of a pause to check in with like, what do I need today to be able to do this thing, so that it isn't just I'm helping, and no one's like refilling my tank kind of feeling, right? And like I said earlier about like not knowing what their needs are, if we aren't really given the space to kind of think about what we want, it is harder to know what to do. So then we end up just doing what we're used to, which is the habit of, oh, this person needs that. Or even as a parent, right? Like my kid needs this, my kid needs that, or my husband, my wife needs this, but what do I need? And then they don't take that moment to pause and think. And that is a boundary because then we have to protect our time and our energy.
Yeah.
So there's different types of boundaries. It's not just like, don't get near me, right? It can be, how do I want to spend my time? How do I want to spend my energy? What do I want to feel, right? And like we talked about this earlier of like, I don't like watching drama and heavy stuff because I feel like I talk about heavy things, and that's a boundary where I don't want to put myself through like an intense TV show unless I want to.
Yeah. And it doesn't necessarily have to be binary, right? It's not just yes or no. There's a continuum in there, right? Like you can still help your parents without saying no to everything, right?
Right. Yeah, really, I don't think an all or nothing, like one answer all the time is the best answer, because people do want to help generally. It's just how can we help with our needs in mind and on our terms a little bit if it's appropriate or available so that we can continue and sustain this care for whoever it is, right? Work even. Like, how can we continue to take care of ourselves and even give to work and not burn out there also or in our relationships?
Yeah. All right. So it sounds like you have a lot of different strategies and a lot of different ways to help people. Everyone's different, right? Everyone's parents are different and everyone's different. So just to kind of summarize here, what are some things that you would encourage people to do? One, they can call you and they can get in touch with you, but maybe if they don't go into actual therapy or coaching, what are some things that people can do to kind of help their relationships and their life?
I think the first thing is just taking that pause, right? I think because there is so many things that is available that we could try and do. But if we don't pause and actually think about what we want and what we need from a relationship, from our jobs, from today, right? Then we can just kind of go through the day or go through the relationship kind of like going through the motions kind of feeling, right? Where we're not being very intentional. So if we are noticing certain feelings like anger, irritability, or tiredness, like that first step is to just really pause and see what we need. And again, because second gens and anyone that has a lot of responsibility may not reflect on their needs as much, that pause is going to be so important so that we can sustain ourselves to continue to take care of other people or think about if we want to set a boundary. Is it worth it for us, right? Or is this like not something I want to potentially have an argument or a discussion about?
Sure.
Yeah, so that pause is really good.
Yeah. All right. So lots to think about out there. So people can get a hold of you. I'll mention those again. So you can get a hold of Allison through her coaching website, which is heyallisonlee.com, or her therapy practice, which is allisonleetherapy.com. Do you feel like there's a little, like for a generation, my generation or even after me, there was a little bit of a stigma about going to therapy as an Asian American, just hold it in, suck it up, just get through it. It'll be fine, that kind of mentality. Do you feel like that's changing a little bit? Or are you finding people that are coming to you kind of, don't tell my mom I'm talking to you kind of thing? Or is it a little more open than it used to be?
Well, first of all, I can't tell their moms if they're talking to me anyway, which is great for them because everything's
That's true.
confidential
There's
in
the
therapy.
confidentiality, yeah.
I think they're open to talking about it, but there's guilt in talking about it is what I'm seeing more of these days, right? Like, I can't believe I think this about, X, Y, and Z. Like, why does this bother me? So then it becomes more of like a negative self-talk as opposed to like, I'm not supposed to talk about it externally. It's kind of like, oh, I'm talking about it, and why does this bother me? Like, why am I the one having these thoughts about these things when I know, that's just how they are, or this is the circumstances. So it becomes a lot of self-blame. So in a way, I guess it still is not talked about very much, but at least they're talking about it in therapy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know how much they're saying it to other people in their lives about, if they go to therapy or whatnot, but I think there is more willingness to at least kind of explore and see why they're feeling the way they are or acknowledge it.
All right, so everyone out there can check out Allison's website for more information. There's heyallisonlee.com and also allisonleetherapy.com. And I'll spell that out for you because honestly, this isn't a problem. This is my problem. But when I first saw it, I thought it was Hey Alice only.
Oh, that's funny.
But again, not your problem, it's my problem. But yes.
I'm sure other people might see it that way too.
And that actually is your Instagram as well, at Hey Allison Lee on social media. But we're not done yet. Are you ready for a little lightning round?
Oh, yes.
All right, let me see. Now, just whatever pops into your head first, and you don't have to think. And if you want to do a longer answer, that's fine too. We call it the lightning round, but it's not really that fast. All right. What is your favorite fiction or nonfiction book that deals with kind of therapy or coaching or mental health?
So I have one that I really like right now, but I'm struggling to finish it. because I think every time I read a part, I'm like, oh, this is so good. Then I like journal about it and then I don't get back to it. But it's Minor Feelings by Kathy Hong. Have you read it?
No, I do. I should. I should because, yeah, she's great. Kathy Park Hong. What do you like so much about her book?
It was really raw. There were parts in there. Well, first of all, the first page was like about her going to a therapist that was not very pleasant to read as a therapist on the other end. But I think it was just very raw and it touched on things that I hadn't really seen in writing where she mentioned even how like so there was a section where she talks about how families who don't have a lot, they end up doing whatever they need to do to survive, right? Including gambling or doing whatever it is to support the family, like stuff like that, where it just, I don't know, the way I read it just resonated so differently than other books that I've read in the past. And that's why I'm saying like it was so hard to kind of continuously read it. Like she talked about the Asian doctor that was on a fight that got beat up, right? It was kind of like really relevant things that were heavy and also really raw that I just found to be very like important but heavy to read.
Okay. All right. So besides actual therapy, what do you think is one of the more therapeutic things that we can do for ourselves?
I think yoga is so good, right? And yoga doesn't have to be the full-on like yoga practice if you don't have time for that or we don't like it. It could even just be stretching and breathing. I think it's so good because it slows us down in a place where we are so fast-paced and everything is like instantly available for us, where yoga is we slow down, we're breathing, we're mindful of our body, and that's part of the self-care that I think is really important, especially with people who are high performing or have a lot of responsibilities. Taking that moment to slow down is really, really beneficial.
Yeah, so it may not even be about the fitness part, but just the slowing down and the taking some time. Yeah.
But some yoga poses are hard too.
No, it is physical. No, I'm not saying it's not physical, but it's not necessarily about the physical.
It doesn't have to be.
Yeah. Very cool. And then you mentioned that you like to watch comedies to kind of lighten things up. Do you have a favorite comedy that you've been watching lately, or?
Yeah, well, we've been rewatching Brooklyn Nine-Nine. That's one of my favorites, actually.
Yeah, it's so wacky. I haven't watched a lot of it, but every time I watch it, it's so funny. It's so fast. Like the writing on that show is so good.
Yeah.
All right. And actually, we talked about this earlier, and I said I wanted some recs, but actually, I forgot I had this question here. Do you have any recommendations for us if we're visiting the San Gabriel Valley? Do you have any food recs for us?
Yeah, so I really like Sam's Noodle. It's in like Alhambra area. It has all the hotius and then the different types of noodles and some rice plates and stuff. And I think that's one of my favorite spots to go to. That one was top of mind, and I always really like Savoy. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I've heard of it. Yeah, I haven't been, but yeah.
Yeah. Any place with noodle soup, I really love.
Now, is it like we've talked about Brother Sun on this show before? Is it kind of like that? Strip malls every couple couple you'll see a strip mall with the little signs on it.
I guess so. Yes, you're right. It is.
It seems like you could just, I don't know. I feel like you could try a new restaurant every day and still not get to them in years. Like there's so many down there.
Yeah.
All right, and we like to end with our signature question. We ask our guests who their Infatuasian is. Infatuasian is anyone in the Asian community that you admire. It could be someone you know or someone that you admire from afar. So, Allison Lee, who is your Infatuasian?
So, I'm not very good at like always following people all the time, but Philip Wang from Wong Fu has always been someone that I've like been on my radar. I really admire like his work in the YouTube space and just representation. And he has a boba shop actually in San Gabriel Valley. And he's opening up one in San Diego. Here you go. I'm telling you about stuff I know about him. And I just really like that he's just always been, like it seems like himself and really representing Asians. And he has a book out, and he also has a son around the same age as me, so that was really cool.
Yeah. No, those guys come up a lot. I think for a generation, that didn't have a lot to look at on TV or movies in terms of representation. The YouTubers, they fill that void so well. They're so relatable, they went to UC San Diego, they had that background, and just for a lot of them, just that relatability and realness. They seem like real people because they are real people. They weren't acting all the time, sometimes they're just themselves. And it's just, as we look back, in the next 30 years or so, I think that was a really important era, that early 2000s YouTube presence and all those guys. And, they're all getting up there. They're all dads now, or they're all, starting families, but it's very cool to see. Good pick. All right. So thanks again for coming in, Allison. And we'll definitely point people to your website.
Thanks, Curtis. Thanks for having me.
It's been my pleasure. So again, you can reach Allison at her websites, or you can follow her on social media at Allison Lee. And as I mentioned, you can always write to us at infatuasianpodcast@gmail.com. And you can follow us on Instagram at infatuasianpodcast. And I'll put all these details in the show notes. So let's see. Until we talk to you again, we hope that you're happy, healthy, and safe out there. Thank you again for listening. We'll talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.